What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Marissa Robinson, Executive Director for DEI at Georgetown. Throughout my career, I have participated in various NCAA leadership development programs, including the Career and Sports Forum, the Postgraduate Internship Program, and the Dr. Charles Whitcomb Leadership Institute. These programs have taught me that leadership takes work and effort. They have reminded me that as leaders, it is our responsibility to continue to grow, challenge ourselves, and encourage those around us to do the same. However, as we continue to grow and to pour into others, it is also imperative to take care of ourselves. Remember, you cannot sustain a movement by sacrificing self-care. So provide yourself some grace and then get back after it. Enjoy the episode.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. I am here at the 2022 NACTA Convention, joined by Tiffany Edlin. Tiffany is a Senior Associate Athletics Director and SWA at Long Beach State. Greetings, Tiffany. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Tiffany, I have you on because Andy Fee said that you are going to be the best guest in the history of the One Question Leadership Podcast, right? So I want to make sure I got you on.
He's also the best boss.
Is he the best boss? Okay. But one thing he did mention was that you are excellent at strategic thinking, right? Working on strategic plan, thinking longer than 1 year out in terms of the department and what you do. So I wanted to have you on to talk about that. I had a recent conversation with Jeffrey Mearns, who's the president at Ball State, about strategic planning. And part of the conversation was, how do you think long-term and not be paralyzed about the past and what's currently happening now, right? How do you use that really to inform long-term thinking? So I wonder about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, my experience stems from budget and human resources. So in that realm, you have to plan. You have to know what your organizational chart's going to look like. You have to know what your position description and minimum qualifications are going to be. So over the last decade, I've just been ingrained in that operational perspective with forecasting revenues and forecasting budgets. And it's translated into strategies that you enact within your athletics department, aligns with the university, aligns with what your departments want to do, aligns with what your coaches want, what the student athletes want, and putting it on paper in a way that you can then hold yourself accountable. So just from my last 10 years of experience in college athletics and higher education, I've just had that, again, from the financial and the HR side, and it's turning into athletic strategic planning.
Okay, so now Long Beach State, 5.5 years, thinking about that and everything you just said, there has to be a wealth of knowledge about all aspects of the department. And there probably has to be a wealth of knowledge about not all aspects, but a big chunk of the actual campus in terms of how athletics is a part of the academic mission of the campus. So tell me about learning everything, knowing every single corner of athletics in order to be able to create a strategic plan and think strategically.
Well, first of all, in college athletic administration, if you worked in college athletics in COVID, you get to add 5 years of experience.
Yeah, right,
so I've been there
exactly.
10 and a half years. Thank you very much. No, in a university setting, it's making relationships with key people. It's putting yourself on committees. It's volunteering your time and getting into those areas, showing up for, if they're hiring an AVP of fill in the blank, serve on the committee, show up to the open forums, be a presence, bring your questions that are athletic centered, but have university perspective. I've met so many people through the interview process. Obviously, I have an athletics agenda, but I poise my questions in a way that show a university greater good. So not just how are you going to generate revenue for athletics, or not just how are you going to help hire people for athletics. How are you going to help the overall institution using the resources that athletics provides? So we're going to be a resource to you, but how are you going to do it for the greater good of the university? And those simple acts in my 5.5 years at Long Beach have put me at the table with the president, with the VP of Student Affairs, with the VP of Admin and Finance. And now he doesn't like it, but our CFO, I have a cell phone number. So now we're at the point where if I have a quick question or, hey, are you in the office? I have a direct line of contact with him that serves athletics, but I usually do it in the nature of serving the university. And just that was an immediate way that I was able to build the relationships and get a seat at the table across the university.
Yeah, that's important. I imagine you do a lot of the work and then sit down with Andy and talk about where you're thinking in terms of the pieces you're putting together for the strategic plan. So tell me about that aspect and the communication between you and him as you work on strategy for long term.
Yeah, I jokingly said he was the best boss in the world, but I'm serious now when I say that he is legitimately one of the best people to work for in this environment and this industry, because he empowers his leaders, and there's so much trust that he's given at every level. He does not micromanage, but he likes to be informed. So we established that communication, and I like to bring him all the ideas, like an a la carte menu of here's a variety of options for you to pick from. Where's your brain? What are you thinking? Am I going in the right direction? We touch base. I don't want to bog him down with a 32-page backup document, but I have it ready in case he wants to dig into the weeds, right? So that's me doing my part. And then engaging and asking him, well, is it important for you to get coaches' feedback on this first before I come to you? Or do you want to vet it before I seek coaches' feedback? That simple in the hall conversation can save us hours of processing time. But he really likes to engage all levels into the decision-making process. And I'm just the arm that facilitates that process to happen behind the scenes.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's, in addition to strategic thinking, there's also this aspect of really bringing it all together for the athletics director to make an executive decision. Yeah. I wonder about the progression to gaining that type of trust from a leader such as Andy Fee.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. You know, there's two different types of trust. It's you either earn it or you have it and then you could potentially lose it. And over time, I mean, I think also the time that we spent in COVID, I mean, I actually got back from maternity leave on March 2nd, 2020. So I had 10 days in the office before the world imploded.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And our biggest worry that 10 days was NIL. And so we talk about being in the trenches together and we talk about going through that. I'm not saying that it was just easy and smooth sailing the entire time. Everybody had adversity, but it was how we bounced back from it. It was how we always had the value and the mission of the student athlete. If you meet or talk to Andy Fee, he's going to tell you about the student athlete.
Right.
And he's going to care about them as a priority, and everything else will surround the common denominator of the student athlete experience. If you're talking about a coach's contract, or you're talking about scheduling, or you're talking about what the state budget allocations are going to be, he will always trail it back to the student athlete. And as soon as I got in that lane, in that line, that mindset, everything I need to say, I need to formulate around the student athlete. And that our communication just blossomed once I figured that out. And it didn't take long to figure out, but I was coming from a financial background. I was so far removed from, you know, it was like 6 degrees of separation before you get to the student athlete sometimes in what my projects were. But when I framed it in how is this going to, no matter how many degrees, impact positively or negatively the student athlete, then I was able to formulate the trust and that we built better communication through that.
How long did it take to get to that point, to understand that? Because, I mean, you know, the habits we have, the synapses that are well entrenched in our brains sometimes take a while to get out of those habits and remap new synapses. Yeah. So tell me about how long it took for you to
Well, let me say, I would probably be honest to say every year it intensifies or it gets better.
Okay.
So probably the first year, you know, you're meeting your new AD, and I had only gotten there about 6 months before he did, and learning the lay of the land, and, you know, and then we had our 1-year anniversary together, and it was kind of like, all right, next. And so it takes like a season, right? And you got to go through the fall and then the winter and then the spring. You learn your lessons, you reset, and then you figure out what were we successful at and what do we need to get better at.
Right.
And every year it just kind of built, and you know, we still have work to do.
Yeah.
We're not perfect.
Yeah, it's not a perfect thing.
we still have work to do, but I feel like a 12-month cycle of investing in each other, and maybe less than that, maybe the academic, you know, the competitive year, that you go through that cycle. And then once you go through those lived experiences together, again, reevaluate, touch point, what can we do better on? What did we master? Let's grow into something new from here. And it's not just between he and I. It's also the rest of the senior leadership.
Staff, yeah.
It's the university CFO. And then it's growing that network that we're advocating on behalf of each other. So when I go and speak to anybody at this convention, or when I go and speak to coach candidates or whatever, we're singing from the same hymn book. And that's really important. So, I mean, I'm talking to you today because he advocated for me.
Yeah, 100%.
So just like a real life example of like how that trust has built into like action with each other. Yeah.
There's an aspect of strategic thinking that is a part of the unknown, right? Have no idea what's going to happen in 5 years, right? But we got to plan for it. So tell me about that, about thinking about the creativity or what may be happening now that may be evolved 2 and 3 years from now that we need to make sure we include that evolution in our strategic thinking.
That has been a growing pain point for me,
Right.
Honestly. I am very numbers and facts and data. If you do one of those like personality communication style guides, bring me the data, give me 48 hours, I'll get back to you. And so in this constant changing environment that we're in, you do need idea people. You do need people that are going to throw it all up against the wall and see what sticks. And Andy Feet is one of those individuals. But for someone that like me that doesn't have that natural ability to just pie in the sky idea, I've had to be very intentional with how I plot and plan and come up with ridiculous ideas. Number one, it's like being okay, being vulnerable, and being okay with coming up with terrible ideas. Being able to walk in and have the most embarrassingly off the wall, that's never going to work in the world idea, and be okay to say it out loud and flesh it out.
Right.
I have some really great colleagues, my HR director and my new director of finance, and I will just pull them into my office and look at the whiteboard and map something out, and they will just both look at me and say, nope, you're crazy, and then walk in. I'm like, okay, but I needed to know that didn't work.
Yeah, right.
Process of elimination, and so I can work. And I've tried to be more efficient. I don't hold them for an hour when I do that now. Now we're down to 5 minutes. But it was that you got to go through the process. And some people want the visualization of it. Some people want the white paper version where they're documenting. Some people, whatever version works for you, continue to grow that skill set and be vulnerable with it.
Is there an aspect of the landscape of college athletics, right? And then you try to plan out for 3 to 5 years, which is darn near impossible, right? With the evolution of it. Offline, you use an analogy of the cell phone, right? Try to plan out what a cell phone is going to look like 5 years from now, what functionality it's going to have. Just now, we can have an estimate, right? It's a computer with a camera, and you can possibly use it as a phone. But 10 years ago, who knew, right? So I wonder about where that has you thinking in terms of thinking strategically and planning out more than a year from now.
I think there's a lot to be said about looking at the past, though, and not letting it freeze you in your tracks and bogging you down with, why didn't we make so much progress yet? I mean, we talk about social injustice and we talk about women's rights. We won't go there. Yeah. But there's the frustrating part about looking at the past, but there's also the ability to learn from past mistakes. And we think of, I saw a video recently of NASCAR doing, pit stop. And it showed a video from 50 years ago. And I think the pit stop was like 2 minutes and 19 seconds, right? And I was like, is this video ever going to end? And now it's like 4 seconds, 6 seconds or something like that. But it took 50 years to make that amount of change. And then I tell myself, but for what? So they can run around the lap faster, right? Like, what's the mission of that? And I don't to take anything away from NASCAR. But when you translate that into college athletics and student athlete experience, and so I look at the end first. What are we trying to accomplish? What is our mission? Long Beach State, we're trying to cultivate leaders and champions in whatever avenue they go. So if that means they want to go deliver mail, or if that means they want to become a nurse, if that means they want to be the president of the United States, however they function the day after they graduate, we've cultivated them into leaders and champions in their own rights. Not every student athlete's going to win. They're not all going to get rings and hoist a trophy. But if they're able to walk away feeling like they've championed skill sets and championed communication and championed relationships, we did our job.
Yeah.
So when you look at that as the end result, then you start formulating your thoughts. What could be 3 years down the line? What could be 5 years down the line? I like to say, focus on what you can control and check one box at a time.
Okay.
Often, especially athletic administrators, but many leaders get paralysis from the decision-making process, or they get bogged down. Their own mental health is fogged because it's overwhelming. I mean, when I open D1 Ticker, there's a lot of information.
Yes, it's coming at you.
And you know, heaven forbid I read any other source of news beyond that, it's gonna be overwhelming. So just take it one at a time and trust that you can go to your colleagues and talk about, I will go to Andy often and say, I got these 9 things and this is the order I have them in. Am I on the same page as you? Do you want me to put something at the top? Have that frank conversation, save time and move forward, and then just check one box at a time. And in the strategic planning, that's similar. I mean, you don't even know, I don't know what priority number 8 is going to be, but I'm going to put a line there because something inevitably will come up, and I've built time for myself to work on that unknown. I think that's another thing I'd like to say, though, is give yourself permission to create space to deal with these unknowns. I have a new student athlete development coordinator. She's wonderful. She came with all these ideas at the end of the spring semester and then has been sitting in the office, no students around, planning her next year. And she's filling it up fast. And I had to tell her, pause. When the students get here in the fall, you won't have time for all those projects. You need to create space to spend time with student athletes. She would have figured that out on her own, but it was important for me to say that to her and give her permission to not be working 60 hours in the summer, you know? So giving her permission to build out your fall semester in preparation, that's what we all have to do, and give ourselves that time and space is really important.
Yeah, that's excellent. Create space to plan for the unknown. That sounds crazy, right?
Especially in an environment where
how do you do
we're
that,
so
actually?
busy. I mean, it's almost the work-life balance for athletic administrators. I'm going through a personal devotion right now where it's talking about, are you substituting, are you ignoring other facets of your life by overworking? Okay. Like, are you trying to avoid the kids at home? Like, are you trying to
using
avoid
work as therapy?
Exactly.
Right.
And so it's been very convicting for me to kind of come to this and giving myself permission to walk around the office and say hello and good morning to people. That's simple. Like, doesn't cost any money. It actually helps the work productivity and the morale, but we get so busy that we lose those aspects. And it sounds silly, but I literally have that on my calendar. If you open up my Outlook, it says, go stop by Paige's office.
Oh, wow.
It says, walk to the pyramid. I got to walk to the pyramid. I got to carve out 45 minutes for myself to go see who's around at this time. And when I can't physically make it out, I have a list that I keep on my desk of who haven't I talked to in a while, and I send them check-in texts. Yeah. So I will have like a group of 5 or 6 coaches that I just haven't talked to in a month or so. They'll get a, hey, how are you? Just thinking of you. Which is
important. That's an amazing process to go through. I'll ask you 1 or 2 more questions, then we'll wrap. One thing you mentioned when I was asking you a little bit about your background is that you were out of college athletics and then got back in. What brought you back into college athletics? Yeah,
I had a really sweet gig at an institution in the University Advancement Division. I was doing HR and budget, had a wonderful boss, and a friend called me that the Long Beach job was open. And I was like, what? Little old me from a D2? Like, no way. Long Beach, like Misty May. I was like, but wouldn't that be funny if I went on an interview? And so I put my application and I got an on-campus interview and I walked in the pyramid and I took a selfie with the Misty May picture on the wall. And I just kept telling myself, like, well, what if? What if I was the most qualified? What if I got the offer? What if I came into D1 athletics? And the boundless opportunities that it created for me and my family. And I knew as a problem solver, there are plenty of problems for me to solve in that unit. I knew that I could come in and actually make a change. So that's what attracted me. I wasn't looking, I wasn't putting my resume in all sorts of places. And I actually didn't know at that time that that athletics was something that I wanted to pursue, but I'm so grateful that I did.
Yeah. Got you in there. Andy seems to like you very much based on what you talked about as a trust and the dynamic there where you within the department is definitely an asset. Tiffany, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, ma'am. That was Tiffany Edlin. She is the Senior Associate Athletics Director and Senior Women Administrator at Long Beach State. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.